really embedded in the thought of collaboration, communication, and being able to share and provide feedback in a meaningful way. So you'll see that they actually have that as an overarching goal for them. And I said what it does is mix the process pieces, on demand, and then the respondent reading. So alignment to our standards, it talks about taking them through the writing process and making sure that they're publishing in narrative, informative, explanatory, opinion pieces. But I think also what's interesting about this, they also have lessons where they're reading the mentor text and they have their teaching point, and they allow them also to have extension where they're writing about the reading that they're learning about. And it allows them for extra practice and challenging tasks of writing opinions and then drawing from evidence from the text. The skills practice guide, and this was something that teachers felt that they liked, especially in comparison to looking at the Calkins guides that they were reviewed and did not choose. They felt that they needed still some kind of skills practice guide. They didn't feel comfortable enough with just having to pull lessons on their own. And this makes it pretty strategic for them of how they teach their conventions of grammar, punctuation, capitalization. And the speaking and listening is very large in this program where there's a lot of group discussion, there's a lot of peer editing, peer feedback, and they also even really take the time to explicitly teach that in the first unit that they do. So the two overarching goals for being a writer, students will be able to write skillfully, creatively, and abundantly, and students will be able to work together to help each other develop socially and collaboratively through practices, discussions, and thoughtful feedback. The nice thing about this, and I thought was a major perk for me, I'm always thinking about the cost of how much it does to like PD and get materials in people's hands, and it's a lot, especially the PD end in the beginning, especially when it front loads it. The nice thing that I like about being a writer, they have 6 online courses that are organized into 45-minute modules. So what we actually did when we were thinking about our PD is that they would first dig into these, put all the materials out on the table, work in their grade team, go through these video trainings together collaboratively with me, and then once we get into it, we've messed around in a little bit, we have our questions, that's when we're bringing professional development people in. So it allowed us to remove the get and sit and listen, and now our teachers, when the consultant comes in, will have a whole lot of practical questions because they've been doing it a little bit. And the videos are extremely clear and explicit, and they show model lessons for every component of what you taught. So you can actually click on it and see how the mini lesson would open. You would click on it, see what it means to have a read aloud of a mentor text and how you connect that to your writing. And I found that to be really practical for the teachers and for myself of really understanding how you would teach with this. This is a little wordy, I'm sorry, but it's a good thing because it's our focus of professional development with this. So in the spring, after our selection for the pilot occurred, we used the June 12th PD day to go through the online modules in the grade teams and focused on planning for the summer as well. We did a doodle of figuring out when the grade teams are all together because coordinating schedules in the summer of teachers is hard. And then the week of 8-7 and 8-14, the grade teams actually got to meet with me and finish the online coursework or plan out Unit 1. So the goal was really to get them to unpack Unit 1 and feel comfortable before they started school. one way I think I'd like to hear more is if you elaborated at the end of the story. So they actually teach them how to give constructive and positive feedback to each other with not just the peer editing end of it or the revision end of it, but also the collaboration and discussion about text and also the discussion about their work. So at the end of their writing, they actually begin to share some of their pieces and then get feedback from their peers on it. And that how that is taught and how the language is supposed to be used is actually explicitly taught through the lessons in the beginning of the year of what does it mean to give meaningful feedback? How do you encourage your peers constructively without criticizing? Those are all lessons that are actually taught and embedded in the beginning of setting their culture so that they're able to say, hey, I'm working on this piece. I want you to take a look at XYZ, or we're looking at this part of the rubric. I want to see, am I actually making sure that my wording is consistent? So that they could say, well, actually, you went a little long with this. This was a little wordy. How else could you say it? So it actually embeds feedback and not just editing, but also then collaborating about generating ideas as well.
And are they going to get, does the program have anything where they actually try and publish a piece for an audience, just so it's a little more authentic?
Yeah. So each unit actually every genre that they work through has a mix of all of those items in it. And the idea is that they begin to read about that genre, really dig into it more, and then say, knowing that I know what the components are of that genre, I'm going to produce a few different drafts. I might select one out of the 4 that I came up with. That's the piece I'm going to take through the full process. And really, and my biggest focus with teachers too is everyone's great at the editing process. Everyone's good with their checklist and their spelling and what they're missing, but thinking about the content and the revision is always a harder lens for them to focus in on. So it's going to be something that I'm going to be doing when I'm in classrooms and working in their grade teams too.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I also wanted to thank you for bringing this into the learning support aspect of this too, and tying that all together so that there's that bridge. I think that's so important, so thank you for that.
First rolling out when Jen came on staff, we were talking about what resources we currently have for writing and then how could we make this a little more connected for everyone, and that's where this really came in. So we're going to go through this, and I know that this might not be a fit for every kid based on their need, but also knowing where it could work and how open it is and the text that it uses, it really lends itself to it well.
Any other comments? No? Good luck and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Professional learning pathways. Dr. Scheid, Mr. Czaplicki, and Mrs. Kulesza.
Mrs. Kulesza, come on up, because I'd like to have the secondary and the elementary perspective. We are so excited to be able to share this new initiative with you. We have been talking in the curriculum department for a number of years now. Thank you, Mrs. Washam, about how do we meet the needs of our teachers and what they need in their own learning. This has been something that we are all very passionate about. We rolled it out this year. It's been very enthusiastically received by the staff. And without further ado, I will let you start speaking, Mr. Czaplicki. But I just wanted to let you know where this has all been coming from and why we decided to do it.
Thank you. ALEX stands for Assessment and Learning in Knowledge Spaces.
Thank you.
Sure, I'll just leave over that. Like Dr. Scheid said, this is certainly what Stephanie was talking about. This is something else that's probably been a long time coming. We've had plenty of professional learning in Pennridge over the years. We just have never had a comprehensive vision and understanding of what we believe about it what it needs to look like, and even to plan it beyond, say, the next couple sessions. This was our opportunity to do that, and this came from a kind of a brain trust over the summer of the supervisors and directors, but also with us, at least through their feedback and conversations that we brought with us with teachers, not just from this past year, but from over the years, and then all of our collective experiences in researching and understanding what's going on in terms of professional learning. One of the things we wanted to make sure we did, and one of the major professional learning schools and programs across the country and around the world is that it's got to be somewhat missional. It has to be connected to the priorities that you set as a district, and we made sure that we were aware of what our mission was. And we knew that the only way to fulfill that mission was through effective professional learning. We sat down and we discussed what we believe about professional learning. And this discussion was not just us throwing ideas around. It was also based on research and looking what works out there, and then looking at our own experiences. Most recently, experiences like EdCamp and like something we used to do. We don't do anymore, called learning carousels. I don't know if you remember those. But based on those successes and based on some of our own reading and research and looking what is successful and what works best, we established some beliefs about professional learning. And you see words like personalizing and empowering and sustaining. And those are beliefs we feel very confident to stand by. And in talking with teachers, these themes come over and over again. You see voice and choice in there. When teachers, like students, have some say in what they're going to learn and what they can pursue in terms of improvement, there's certainly greater engagement. And of course, there's plenty of times where there's certain things we all have to learn. There wasn't much room for passion and curiosity when we did the Alice training, but there's a time and a place for everything, and certainly when it comes to improving individual practices, being able to pursue an area that interests you or that perhaps you need to grow in is appropriate, and having a culture that supports the idea that you're going to try something new and it might not be perfect, and that's okay, because we're going to talk about it, we're going to collaborate on it, we're going to reflect on it, do all the things we need to do to help you move forward. So we stole Simon Sinek's The Golden Circle. And the Golden Circle is basically his model for improving organizations, and the theory would suggest, or the success would suggest, that organizations that understand the why, that put the why at the center of what they do, are the ones that are most successful. Our why takes us back to a somewhat tiring but nevertheless effective metaphor of the oxygen mask. When you fly, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping anybody else. Even your children, put it on yourself, help yourself first, and then you'll be better suited to take care of everybody else. In our situation, it's the same goes with teachers. It doesn't mean we disregard students. It just means that we have to always be aware that we are learners, and we need to be perpetual, passionate learners if we're always going to hone our craft and do the best we can for our students so that they can succeed in whatever their path might be. Throughout the presentation, there's some links you're more than welcome to click on. I'm not going to click on every single link, but just some of the ideas you can see we pulled both from industry and of course from educational sources. Our how is our learning pathways, and we heard a little bit about that in Stephanie Washam's presentation. And a learning pathway essentially just allows an educator to select an area where they want to do some learning. Some of the pathways are, we established some pathways, we created them based on what's going on right now. So of course there's an elementary pathway for the learning, the writing pilot, because we certainly want to honor what's already going on. So a little bit later, if you look through the slides, you can see secondary and elementary pathways, and you'll notice at least at the secondary level, it embraces things that are already going on. There's certainly tech initiatives that are going on. Canvas, blended learning experiences, the expansion of our cyber program, all areas that are currently going on, and we certainly want to allow people the opportunity to continue work in those areas. It's also important that teachers are allowed the time and place to know that I'm doing this today, and I'm working on this today, and I'm going to also get more time down the road to do the same thing. That idea of coming back to the same thing captures the idea of quality over quantity. When we try to whack too many balls at the same time, we just end up getting tired. We don't actually learn anything. But if we can attack one thing at a time and follow it through and most importantly, implement it in the classroom and think about it and talk about it with other educators, it becomes most effective. And of course, the what are the new ideas and the new practices that emerge in the classrooms and that influence the curriculum and those things that influence each other. And again, the learning cannot be separated from the collaborative nature of this. And the idea of educators learning things that they want to learn about and implementing in their classroom, but most importantly, talking to each other. The idea to have time to just sit and talk to each other about what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, and hey, can I share some ideas, or can you share some ideas with me? I can't tell you how powerful that is, and I think you know that. And I think that's too out of the realm of some common sense, not only in terms of in the way educators learn, but in the way any organization or any team succeeds, that learning together is really important. A learning path, what might it look like? It's based on a topic like project-based learning or writing instruction or technology integration or whatever the pathway might be. The pathway would have essential questions. Some we might develop, but more than likely a teacher would develop questions, or the teacher team would develop questions that's pursuing learning in that pathway. We also looked at not only the learning forward standards, and we considered the standards of all the individual content areas, but we also considered the ISTE standards, and that's the International Society of Technology and Education. And while that sounds very techy, if you look at their standards, they're actually very towards the 21st century, talking about things like critical thinking and collaboration and creativity and communication and all the things we know we want our students to have. So we found that to be a very broad set of standards that would be a nice reference point for not only student learning, but for teacher learning. And they provide both types of standards if you investigate if you take a look at their standards. And they're pretty simplified too. They're not too long. Ultimately, number 3 is the goal. Implementing something in your classroom based on your learning and your conversations and your collaboration. And then coming back and talking about it and sharing the experience. That's where it all matters. All the research and all the reading and all the learning doesn't really mean anything until you take it to the kids and try it out and see how effective it was or is. It's just a graphic I forgot to take out. Sorry, there's a couple different versions of this, so I tried to slice it down. That graphic actually is actually feedback, a combination of feedback from one of our previous sessions last year where we did an ed camp. So there was a lot of different feedback that came back, and those are some of the ideas that rose to the top. You can take a look at these, and I'm going to have Joan actually come up and talk a little bit about the differentiation between elementary and secondary. Secondary is a little easier because we have less buildings, and we also have less varying time constraints, especially on those Wednesday meeting days. So Joan's going to come up and just talk a little bit about how elementary kind of differentiates from secondary.
So as Hilary said, the overall idea of the pathways is the same for elementary as it is for secondary. However, the way that is going to be implemented will differ due to the difference between elementary and secondary. Whereas secondary is organized more by departments, elementary is organized by grade levels and special areas. So with only 2 elementary supervisors, it can be challenging at times to figure out how to meet the needs of teachers in 6 grade levels who teach multiple subjects, as well as ESL teachers, IST teachers, learning support teachers, and so on. But we think that this is probably going to be supportive in our being able to meet those needs. And the way this is going to be planned out is for our Wednesday meetings, which are, aside from about two or three meetings that are designated. There's an SEL meeting at the beginning of the year, one at the end of the year. And then some of the meetings that are going to be used for analysis of data. All of the other Wednesday meetings, which would be those third and fourth Wednesdays, are going to be pathway meetings. And then we also have certain designated in-service days, which will provide greater chunks of time, 3 hours at a time for those pathways. So teachers are going to be asked to, at least in the elementary teachers, next Wednesday is their first Wednesday after school meeting. We've already shared an orientation to the pathways to get them thinking about it on August 24th. And then we've given them some time to propose their own pathways, as Hilary touched on. If there's something in the pathways that we're not suggesting, then they're able to suggest one themselves. The only caveat with that, or it's really not a caveat, I think it's really something exciting, is that they would be the facilitators of that pathway, and they would design it and facilitate it. So they have until this Thursday to submit a pathway proposal, and then Dr. Scheid, Mrs. Washam, and I will review those, and any that are approved then will be added to the pathway list. So far, it seems that our elementary teachers are quite satisfied with the pathways we're proposing, because we haven't gotten any new pathway proposals yet. But I think we've done a pretty nice job of offering a diverse range of pathways. Some of them are fixed. The schools that are running pilots, such as West Rock Hill with the writing pilot, Guth and Grass, who are doing the Number Worlds pilot and learning support, and Seiler and Sellersville, who are doing the MTSS pilot, those teachers will have fixed pathways, because that should be their focus this year. And all of their professional development, all of their meeting time to collaborate and communicate should be devoted to those pilots that are going on. As Hilary said, we want to respect that by making sure that we allow them the time to really work through those learning curves and growing pains as they implement pilot programs. And then for the rest of the teachers, they're open to select whatever pathway meets their passion, their interest, or their needs as a professional. And they range from best practices in reading and language arts instruction to social skills, which is dealing with teaching executive functioning skills in the classroom, to best practices in ELL, and so on. So we have, I believe, 9 other pathways for teachers who are not, or we have 9 pathways in total at elementary, and of those, the fixed ones, the others are open to all teachers. So that's how the elementaries are going to work, very similar to the way it will be at secondary, just slightly different in the way it's going to be implemented. Some of them will be done face-to-face meetings, others will be done via reading articles, watching videos, and then coming together to have face-to-face discussions. We'll be relying on technology, perhaps for Skyping, for doing a Nearpod, but the teachers are excited about that, because I think in the past couple of years, they really got very used to having 4 supervisors plus the technology person be able to meet with a grade level at a time in these meetings and be able to devote attention just to one grade level. And that's been a consistent thing in our feedback for professional development, that they would like those opportunities to get together and collaborate. And I think we finally have stumbled on a good way to provide that to them and still make it worthwhile within that limited time that we have.
As you can see there also, you might wonder when we set teachers in situations to be in a learning pathway, there are some ideas and suggestions for pathway, what they might be doing, but we're not, we can probably guess at what you probably shouldn't be doing, but I'm sure there's many different things that are productive and necessary as part of this. Sometimes it's as simple as taking some time to read. I mean, there's so much powerful information out there, but we hardly have the time to read it. And you can take a look at that last link there that has some suggestions. So how do we capture all this information? This graphic up here is actually a kind of a grown-up KWL. KWL is a very simple information collector in terms of what do you know about this, what do you want to know about this, and what do you want to learn, or what have you learned, or what will you learn about this topic. We just kind of expanded it to a KWHIES. I'm not going to say that because there's really no real way to say that. To what do you want to know about this pathway, or pathway and topic. I'm kind of interchanging the two. What do you know about it? What do you want to know about it? And talk about how you would collect the resources. As stated before, the most important part of this is probably the last three portions of this graphic here, and that's how will you implement this learning in your classroom. And that would be certainly individual reflection, but also a collective discussion with people, members of your team. And then how will you evaluate that? Will you survey the kids? Will there be some sort of assessment? And we fully expect to collect this information from teachers to see how they're doing and to see what they think about things. And I imagine there's going to be some things that they'll never try again because it just didn't go so well, but I also imagine there's going to be some things that we can't even envision that will positively impact the way things are operating and going on in individual practices and classrooms. And then, of course, our last point there is about sharing. As you know, we have a lot of amazing things going on in this district. And one of my biggest tongue-in-cheek criticisms of some of my best teachers in the English department is you do great work, but no one knows what you're doing in here. You shut that door and magic happens. You have to share. I think it's almost an obligation of a great educator to share with other educators what you're doing, and this is part of that mechanism to share your ideas and share what you're doing. And we feel that the expertise is all over the place in this district, and this is one small way to at least start getting some of that expertise out there. If you click on the image, you can look at an already filled out version of this. We just used the idea of Genius Hour, but that's just an example, so teachers might have some idea what it looks like. So in the future, and still in development, we're looking at badges and credentials and things that we can offer teachers in the digital sphere in terms of, well, I spent all this time working on this, and whether it's writing instruction or the new science standards, whatever it might be, and just some acknowledgement that I accomplished this, that I spent this time and I implemented and I did this. At this point, we're looking at digital badges, but I don't know, people like stickers too, who knows. This is also a tremendous opportunity for teacher leadership, and as Joan said, when teachers suggest, propose, and that's where we are now, we're in the stage where teachers are proposing new pathways. We also want that to imply that they would also be willing to lead that pathway or co-lead or facilitate. And we also suggest that facilitation does not imply expertise. You may just have a desire to learn about this and become much, much better with integrating technology effectively, but you want to learn, so you're not the expert, but you're willing to bring people together and have the discussions, and that's absolutely fine. Different learning options, like webcasts and podcasts and things like that, and off-site and blended, and all different types of things we'd like to look at through this. And as you can probably tell, this is our learning pathway too, how to deliver this well to benefit, ultimately to benefit kids in the classrooms, keep them growing and learning, and of course that's only going to happen if we keep our teachers learning and growing as well. And then of course, how our time is going to look moving forward, and then the relationships between pathways and what teachers are working on, and how that might work in terms of other people coming into your classroom and seeing what's going on, all working together. One powerful notion from all this is the idea to give the time and the space and the energy to allowing someone just to pursue that one thing and get the mileage out of that, as opposed to the classroom or the professional learning of 10,000 things that unfortunately just seems to be the way of it in education. So we feel that's going to be very powerful. And the last slide is just some inspirational and references to a lot of the things we talked about, and also just some inspiring reads that helped us. And you can see they go in and out of the educational realm to just basic human motivation and learning. Questions?
Mrs. Kulesza, I have a question for you, and partly because you sat upon this board in times past. But you mentioned Wednesday afternoons with the teachers at the elementary level. Is that a contractual issue? As you probably know, because we're
Yes.
embarking on yet another round of negotiations with professional staff starting in January.
Yes.
And if it is, we need to know that that's something we would
Yes.
seek to change if we can.
Quite frankly, having the language as it is now, which says that it happens on Wednesday for this hour, hampers our efforts. If it was flexible and it wasn't tied to a day and it was based on hours or so many hours a month or whatever, that would allow us to schedule things more flexibly. So it would enable Stephanie and I to be physically present more with a variety of groups. Because right now, if we have 5 different groups meeting, we're either bouncing around as best we can do, and when you look at 7 buildings and 6 grade levels, we don't always get that quality face-to-face time that we would like and that teachers would like. So yes, it would be very helpful if it wasn't tied into a set date or a set time. That would be wonderful.
Other questions?
Yes. I think probably part of the reason that you're not getting other suggestions is because you've pretty much hit the nail on the head with a lot of the ones that you have here, and probably everyone already has multiples that they want to do. And it also looks like you maybe referenced either the professional development survey or what the teacher's feedback was, because I see a lot of the main things that they had looked at up there, or had shared up there. And I guess my question was, how long are you on the same pathway? Is that set, or is there flexibility with that? What happens if you want to do more than one? How does that work?
That depends, and that's going to be part of our learning. I mean, we'd like to see someone stick with it for a year, at least enough time to do something differently in the classroom and think about it and reflect on it and share it, and have the time to go back and do it again if it didn't work out. But if they want to move on to something else and do something else, I don't see why that can't happen. We certainly don't want stone jumpers, but having someone at least, I would say at least a year, because when you stretch that out into time, that's not a tremendous amount of time when you look at the actual time dedicated to doing this learning and implementing and then sharing and then reflecting. And also, I would think a year would be appropriate, but some things are bigger. Certainly someone might be looking at writing practices for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And as far as I'm concerned, that'd be great. So that's a great question, and something we're looking at as well to see what will develop. When you talked about choices in the elementary and even in the secondary, what we're finding is it's those specialized groups that are really coming with ideas that are amazing. Special education. We had a group put in today about using, for special education students, using the sensory and tactile techniques for learning. I would have never thought of that pathway, but they did, and that's what's important. Our counselors and our psychologists and our health staff looking at things like maybe go visit a mental health facility to see what goes on there. And interact with those professionals to see how we can better help our kids in those areas. Mindfulness. So these are all areas that are just rising as that group of professionals who certainly is not within my expertise, but certainly they know what they need, and they are now suggesting it, and we'd love to give them the time and space to pursue those pieces because we know they're going to help kids.
And I I commend you for doing this too, because, you know, nobody knows what they need to learn more than they do, you know, and when they're passionate about it, obviously they're gonna be, you know, that much more interested in the information. And even though they didn't choose the Alice training, I did hear that a lot of people had a lot of fun with that training.
Yeah, it was
But it is nice for them to
fun.
have those choices and actually learn what they need to learn and come up with those ideas. So I think everybody's gonna be really excited. I think one of the biggest frustrations I've always heard was, you know, that they're kind of directed to a certain professional development
Yeah.
path, and that may not meet their needs, so I.
Yeah.
And so with the pathway, then you're saying it might be kind of fluid and different from person to person, so people could either, you know,
Yeah, and
jump
then,
in or
you
stay
know,
longer than others, or.
The other piece is some of the pathways, like best practices in using technology in the classroom. You can do that for years. You could do literacy. You know, you could go writing, and then you could go writing for special needs, and there's all, to continue with the metaphor, sub-pathways and smaller roads and so forth.
There
and
may
so
be
on.
some overlap within pathways or pathway sessions as well.
And it may be something too, where like the same, that pathway may go on for years because more people that didn't choose it last time are gonna jump in, and so it'll just keep continuing on, and, you know.
And I think we see this kind of as the carousels, for those of you who have been here a while. Over the summer, when we still had flex, and that's another thing I would be very happy to see come back, flex hours. Teachers were required to get 14 hours of flex every year. And we would, in order to help enable them to do that, as well as enable them to get active 48 credits, we started, it must be at least seven years ago, professional development carousels. We ran a week in June and we ran a week in August. And it was varied topics that they would come in for a week, so they would propose. And the first couple of years, it was very much supervisor created carousels. But by year 2 and year 3, it really was supervisors were providing a minimal number of them, and it was teachers who were coming up with, this is what I'm doing in the classroom, this is what I want to share with people, or this is what I learned in something I attended and I want to share that. So I think that's our hope and that's our expectation, that this will really bloom into something that's really teacher generated and comes organically from what teachers are looking for and interested in, rather than us saying, here's some pathways, pick one. I think we'll still do that, but I really expect to see this grow and change and evolve, just like the carousels did.
So the KWHIES, right, does it have a way to, K?
Go ahead, you give it a try.
Yeah, I don't know how you said, okay.
Please.
That chart, so is everyone required to complete?
Well, the
chart?
first part of it is more of a group thing, like what do you know about this? So as people would sit down and say, well, what do we know about this? What do we want to know? How are we going to go about finding information? But the last three, the implementation, evaluation, and sharing, that would be something we'd like to collect individually, because we kind of need to know people are enacting things in their classroom.
Right, so I'm just wondering, so the evaluation, it just says how will you evaluate the impact, and then how will you share, but they don't actually give their evaluation in this chart, so I'm wondering, is that going to be?
Well, they could. I mean, when they fill out the chart, they could put a link to an assessment they used, or they could show a survey, or whatever means that they evaluate, beyond just, well, I think it went well. Maybe some evidence that, maybe this is what my kids said about the experience, or this is what.
Right, or just a summary, right, a
Yeah,
summary,
sure.
or something, because here in the example, it just says student reflection and feedback, it's not giving any, like, a actual.
Oh, in the example,
Okay.
you mean in the Genius Hour example?
Yeah, in the
Yeah,
example,
we-
it
yeah.
doesn't actually give an evaluation.
We just created that, so the teachers could see, what could be filled out on it.
Right, so I just think the
question.
question, maybe if you ask the question, instead of how will you evaluate, you also want to somehow draw out the evaluation, because,
Sure. What types of evaluations might you use, something like that?
but still, to write an evaluation. You know what, you know what I'm saying? That this is just saying how will you evaluate, then you don't actually ask for their evaluation. You never
Right.
ask for their actual feedback at the end of the year. How did it all go?
Right, right.
going to probably be a logical outcome as we get towards the end of the year. That
You mean from teachers?
Yeah.
Right, from the
Oh,
teachers.
okay.
Yeah, I'm saying
thinking
from the
students,
teachers.
Right, oh, yeah, we
Yeah, not from
definitely,
the students, yeah, from the teachers.
yeah, that would be, in
To
fact.
evaluate their own learning is what I'm
Absolutely.
saying.
Absolutely. And the whole experience in general, frankly.
Right,
We'd like to know.
right, yeah, if how, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add too, I like that you're putting in that flexibility for them to come up with how, they're gonna demonstrate that rather than it being set for them, because I think that's always frustrating too, when people feel like, oh, well, I have to fill out this form at the end, answering these questions, and that's not really demonstrating what I've learned, and so having that
Right.
open-ended, I think
The
is
goal
really
is not the,
cool.
right, it's not the form, it's the implementation, and it's just, I don't want to say common psychology, but pretty well-known, motivation in psychology about how we learn and think about how you learn, best. And there's an ebb and flow to it. There's not a, here it is, and, go do it.
3 sentences, lovely.
Any other comments or questions? Not, thank you. Last item is the PD update on the PSSAs and Keystones.
Well, I actually have some good news to share, which isn't typical. Governor Wolf and Mr. Rivera, our Secretary of Ed, they announced some changes to PSSA assessments this year, and it's really revolving around the reduction of time. And we have all been talking about this for many years now, the amount of time it takes all of our students to complete the PSSAs and the preparation that goes in for those exams. So, coming this spring, the English Language Arts PSSA exam will be reduced from 4 sections to 3 sections, and the Math PSSA from 3 sections to 2 sections. Actually, the ELA by 45 minutes, and Science by 22 minutes, and Math by 48 minutes. So we are, in essence, will reduce the amount of time 3rd through 8th grade students spend taking the exam. And then 4th through 8th grade students will spend at least 20% less time taking these exams, reducing the time from about 8 hours to 6.5 hours. The testing time for 3rd graders will be cut by 25%. What they're planning on is they are going to remove a section of multiple choice from the math. That's what we know so far. I'm sure more information is coming. But that is one section that they will be removing. And I guess I do want to say this. I think our students, there's an open-ended response in the PSSAs for math, and our students do very well in that. So we were actually excited to know. I mean, I know other people aren't, but we were excited about that. Our students do very well with open-ended. Additionally, the State Department of Ed is planning to move the testing window for PSSAs later in the school year, but not until 2019. That will allow teachers to cover more of the content to be tested naturally in their instruction, instead of forcing them to hurry up and we don't get to that unit, and let's put that unit before the other unit because it's tested. So we're appreciative of that as well. However, that change won't take effect until next school year, since school boards already have their calendar set for the coming school year, and the suggested time frame will be at least at the end of April. We're hoping for the beginning of May. But that's the information we have thus far. Any more information, I will make sure that we have it. We're pleased that they're finally taking action. And to be perfectly honest, I'm glad that they're removing the multiple choice and not the open-ended, since we are spending a good deal of our time teaching our students how to problem solve and write that out. What does that look like? Our math program actually focuses on that. So that's the current update. Anybody have any questions or comments?
How is that going to affect, isn't there AP testing in the beginning of May too? So if people are taking any Keystones and then they're taking AP, is that all going to be?
We have our testing calendar. This hasn't affected Keystones yet. They haven't even given the word on whether they're continuing with Keystones yet. This is strictly PSSAs. And our
okay.
testing calendar is out.
I thought you were saying it was all going to move to.
No, this is PSSAs.
This is PSSAs.
Mhm. And no word yet on holding on the Keystone. We're waiting. But yes, our testing calendar is out.
Looks like we're at least moving slowly in
So
the right
I'd love
direction.
you to be very
Slowly.
pleased, everybody would be, but yes, but it's better. It's not exactly where we wanted, but it's better. Thank you.
All right, that's the end of our agenda. I would like to ask the board members here, the items that we discussed tonight, items B through F, are offerings for the summer. And we could easily put that on the September 25th calendar, on the full board meeting, for approval of those for next year. My question is, are board members on board with all of those, all 5 or 6, whatever they are?
I'm not on board with running them all, but don't
That's
we
right.
usually get costs and then do we need to approve the costs? Like, what would we actually be approving?
But they will run, basically.
Okay. And I guess really, I mean, the only thing that that we were asking for changes would be summer school, so maybe not, and that's something, I mean, we know we're gonna run, but,
Right.
so I'm just, I'm fine with all of them running, I'm just wondering what exactly we're approving, or we're just, and then does it have to come back again if all we're doing is approving that they run? Because they didn't really propose, we don't have the proposals of the dates and the.
No, not yet. We
cost.
would have to revisit it for sure.
Yeah.
But this way, everyone would know that they're going to do that, or going
I
to
know.
be able to do it.
Right, I don't know, what do you think, Dr. Scheid? Is it better just to have it one-time proposal, or is it better to have something early and then come back again and vote a second time?
I think it's better that everyone knows that they will run, and then we come back and we give you any kind of changes and updates and costs. But usually they're asking, are we going to run this? Do you think it will run this? So if we can let them know ahead of time that, yes, we'll run it, but we will come back to the curriculum committee and give any kind of updates to cost or location or any of those things. So we would still do that, but I do think we would be very appreciative to know that they will run.
And then, we know we're gonna run summer school, so would we hold off on summer school? Because I would really like more information about some of the things we were saying. Is it possible to make it longer, or, some of the suggestions that the parents had to make it better?
Yes, absolutely. I'll give you that information that you're looking for. Are you saying not to approve, well, we're going to run summer school, right? We
Right,
always
but,
run
and,
that.
that's really the one too, where, I don't know, there's more variables. Yeah, wait, we know we're gonna run summer school, so, and you're gonna run summer school, so you don't need to vote on that. And can we continue the discussion about some of the questions that we had at another meeting and then vote on it? But that just seems,
I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, like we could put it on the October agenda and talk about it some more. I'd be absolutely happy to do that. Okay? Yep, absolutely.
So the others will be on the September, the first 3 will be on the September meeting, the summer.
So it would be September.
All the
Okay,
camps.
see all these. Hold up on the elementary side. Some school.
Summer school.
Yeah, we'll do that in October. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Anything else from board members? No? Then public comment. Yes, Mr. Thompson, welcome back.
Thank you. Really good to, no? I don't know what's Okay, it's not going to wait too long. It's really good to see all of you again. I wanted to comment, it's really fun to come back and get myself immersed into this whole challenge that we face here. My background, my 40-plus years running a business company, and then being immersed in this environment that really was very different, obviously, from where I came from. But I'd like to just comment a little on my 4 years that I was here. When I went to the Lancaster meetings, and the school board folks said that we should think and act strategically. And there's one challenge that I think we all face. One of the books that I read had a particular test that's run at the college level, the university level, freshmen coming in, and then repeated again as seniors. to measure the increase in creativity during their four-year college. This was being done because, in general, industry is not happy with the output of our colleges and universities, and in fact, our whole educational system. And one of the comments from the CEOs that was quoted in this particular article said, "It really makes no difference to me what facts you know when you come out. I'm interested in your ability to solve problems, to ask the right questions, not to regurgitate answers to questions that somebody else came up with. But creativity is all about asking the right questions and thinking out of the box." I asked a question in one of the meetings here, and I don't remember who I asked, but the question was, is there some version of that test? I understood from the article that I read, and I probably have it in my files if I can find it, but it talked about it really was not based on what you know. It was more your thought processes and your ability to think creatively. And it seemed like it could be redone for the high school level, or for the scholastic level. And the challenge that I would face for you, Hilary, and you guys are great. You're creative. You're really wonderful people. My question to you is, are you evaluating creativity here? If so, how? And is there some mechanism that you could, I heard a comment, I heard somebody say that when kids come into kindergarten, they're real creative. But as they proceed through the 12 grades, somehow we lose that ability to be creative. And I wonder if there isn't some way that we could measure that creativity as our kids proceed through school. Because ultimately, I think that will be the test of their ability to be productive in the business world, in the academic world, or the scientific world, or wherever they choose. When we had Dr. Young Zhao, his comment was that this PSSA and the international testing standards, Shanghai was #1 in the world in their test scores. These kids were almost completely not employable. His comment was, China is not celebrating how great they are. They're coming our way when we're heading their way. And I'm really happy to see that some of this less emphasis on this multiple choice kind of thing that really is not an indicator, in my humble opinion, of what kids are, their ability to be productive in the real world. So my challenge to you, I don't expect an answer, but my challenge to you is, how can we develop the means to help our kids be creative? Some are. I mean, some of these kids that I saw in there, they're incredible. But are we able to help every child be more creative? And I think this is our ultimate challenge. And I think our whole civilization, and really in this scientific age, where facts aren't really what's important. So again, it's really great to see all of you, and I'm thinking about you even though I don't show up, but you guys are great, and I commend your efforts, and thanks for doing what you're doing. Good night.
Yes, that's what I wanted to talk
jump
about.
in there. Mr. Thompson, it's always delightful to see you. And I wanted to let you know, in terms of creativity, I think you'd be really excited to know that we have started a new STEM program at our middle schools.
I heard that.
Oh, and I hope that you get a chance to come in and see what's going on. Because talk about creativity, this is only week, what, 2? Are we in week 2? And I've been at the middle schools, and I'm watching these kids, you know, the teachers are giving them some materials and saying, you know, this is the problem, they're working in teams, and they're creating, and they're coding, and they're talking, and yes, we are definitely talking and giving students plenty of opportunity for creating. Well, I guess we'll have to think about how we'll measure that. But I can tell you observational data, conversations with
You just talk to these kids, and then you talk to them about, here's a wonderful quote. Won't say anything other than just the actual quote. So a student is in the STEM class, I think it was an 8th grader, and he's working really hard, he's putting this robot together.